Welcome to Deep Transformation, Self-Society Spirit. I'm Roger Walsh, and our co-host is John Dupuy. And our guest today is A.H. Almaas, a pen name, also known as Hameed Ali. And Hameed is with us for the third dialogue in our Wisdom Series, looking at the Diamond Path, this remarkable body of knowledge and practices and teaching that Hameed has created. Hameed is also the creator of the Ridhwan School. And our exploration over this Wisdom Series is a chance to dive deeply into this tradition, to really grasp the nature and teachings of one of the major new traditions of our time, and a major synthesis of East and West, of contemporary and ancient, and bringing the best of psychological and spirituality together. So today, in our previous sessions, we've kind of taken an overview of the Diamond Path, Diamond Approach, sorry. In our last session, we focused particularly on the method of inquiry, which is the central practice, deep inquiry into experience as both the source of wisdom and of healing and of the unleashing of our human capacities and potentials. And today we begin kind of systematically moving through the central text of the Diamond Approach, which is called The Inner Journey Home. It's a large, comprehensive synthesis of the path, and there's a lot in it. And both John and I have felt actually significantly impacted and transformed by our work with it as we've studied it closely in anticipation of this series. So to begin at the beginning, in the introduction, Hameed, you offer like a physician. It's sometimes said that the Buddha was sometimes described as the great physician, still sometimes is described that way. And you, like the Buddha and like a good physician, give us a diagnosis of our contemporary, the root problem or pathology or challenge in our both contemporary culture and way of thinking, and in our understanding of ourselves. And you give a vision of health and possibility, and you also give a path from that limitation to the possibilities. So you say the central problem is that we suffer from a dissociation between ourself or soul, between the world, and between fundamental nature of reality, being or God. And you suggest that what you're trying to do is offer us a new vision, to communicate a vision that heals this dissociation and its resultant suffering. So there's a lot in what I just said, and I invite you to take off from anywhere you'd like there, Hameed.
Well, I think one thing you bring in the Buddha, I'm sure you could bring in other people, what is the condition of the world? It hasn't changed much.
Yeah.
Humanity hasn't changed much since the time of the Buddha. If you remember, the Buddha was reluctant to teach at the beginning because he didn't think can land in in a fertile place, but he was convinced by the god Indra that yes, there are people who can learn, which is really my view, that there are people who can learn, and I am working with people who are learning. Although I don't think of this teaching. That's why some people sometimes get ask me all these odd questions, especially if they are, represent the newspaper or whatever, whether this is, or whether we're getting our age mean we're going to be a big transformation, humanity will become more spiritual. Usually my response is, why do you think that? Just because we have COVID? So some people thought COVID will wake up humanity. Well, it woke up some people, but woke up some very terrible thing too. As you
Yeah.
know. So I said, no, no, humanity doesn't change that easily. I mean, difficulties don't change humanity except maybe a few individuals. Human beings are mostly, and it is not humanity's fault, and it's more like the what I call the ordinary world, the world of most human. I don't take it to be it is as many take it as because of a mistake or an error or something. And yeah, it's true. I call it like other the world of sleep. Many people are asleep, but what they're asleep to what they truly are, what reality can be. So I don't think the ordinary world is an illusion, as some people say. I think it's just one way reality appears, is the way most of us know it. And if you look at all realizations, whether they're non-dual or more like a Zen kind of suchness, they still happen within the ordinary world, and they still have to deal with the world as it is, the physical world. And so I see the physical, our world is sort of some sense fundamental and basic. That's where everybody starts. And it is the world of suffering, but I think the suffering is because, you know, large but emotional and mental suffering. I mean, physical suffering is not relieved usually by spiritual work, but mental, emotional can be relieved, and that is because human beings generally they're looking for satisfaction and happiness, in some sense, in the wrong place or the wrong way, and where it can only come in a real, continuing way if we are in touch with our depth, which is our spiritual nature. When we are in touch with it and recognize that is what we are, and that it can pervade the world, that's when we possible for us to have true freedom from suffering, and you know, and also not only in our work, in this approach, I don't focus just on freedom from suffering. It is this work is a journey into reality. So it's a matter of discovering what reality is, what the world is, what are the different ways reality can be. Turns out reality is very dynamic, very always transforming and changing, presents itself to our perception in different ways because that's another thing we need to know to take sort of to be pay attention to, which is reality is only what we perceive it to be. You can't say what is the reality out there. We don't know what is the reality out there beside what we experience. Our experience is all what we have, right? And so things appear in our experience, the world or reality appears in our experience of ourselves included, in different way. It cannot appear as most people do, as this human individual, as a body that goes around and does things and succeed or not, have difficulties, and go through the life course, which everybody has to go through, even with the enlightened ones. However, the more realized, the more we're aware of ourselves, there's other dimensions to our experience that brings in a sense of joy, compassion for others, understanding, and recognizing that this world is only just one way we can experience reality. There are other ways we can experience it as a world of pure awareness or pure love, or this world can appear the other realization in this teaching. Well, this world does not necessarily appear as a world of love or realization or awareness, but as the ordinary world, but with no self. People think if the self is gone, the world will have to change to become just pure aware. It's true that happens, but there are other realizations. Like you look at the Zen realization, they don't say the world is all awareness. They say talk about everything is what it is. Right? The blade of grass is a blade of grass, and that's it. That blade of grass there is that blade of grass, and it is not necessarily the result of its previous lifetime. It is just what it is. But it is ordinary world. It is a blade of grass. It's not made out of awareness. The question whether it's made out of awareness or is doesn't come up in that category. So that's another way we can experience the world. So it's interesting. And I think the main delusion that people suffer from, people who are not involved in deep spiritual transformation, is the belief that the way we experience this world is the only way.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it is. That is reality, and you could get, you know, more successful, more happy, or less, or all of that. So taking that way, that limits reality from revealing other possibilities of how we can experience it, other part of what we are, what the world is, what other dimension or other possibilities, other of reality appearing in different way. So the world in terms of that delusion that that's the way it is and that's the way it can be, that hasn't changed throughout known history. You know, that hasn't changed. Humanity is like that, and in the 21st century, actually, this is more obvious. Meaning the result of that conviction is reveals more the difficult or the conflictual nature of life and that kind of view of reality. So we have all these conflicts or these enmities or I mean, where inequality is becoming such a big deal, and we have racism for many people seems to be an ordinary thing. For instance, well, so if you know your spiritual nature, you can't be racist. There's no way. I mean, you realize that's in the nature of human being that we're all the same. It doesn't matter what our identity or color or anything like that. But if you don't know that, you know, you identify with whatever group or whatever influence you have come from outside world, not from your inner resources. And then we are living in a world now where, I don't think it's that different from you. There's always been conflicts and wars and all of that. We have them now, and it's coming, I think, in this country, in the US, where it's sort of lived for 50 years in relative harmony. So that harmony is sort of broken at the present time. And there is more, it's almost we're back to the time of civil war or something like that, or before it. So the differences are irreconcilable or seem irreconcilable. And now spiritual work doesn't try to resolve those social things because doesn't spiritual work is not it's not a religious movement to sweep the world. The spiritual work is for individuals to transform, and small groups usually transforming. And that's always been the case, it's still the case. there are maybe more people who are on the surface looking for spirituality, whatever, but it doesn't go. Many don't really go deep enough and spend the time to practice and explore, laying a little mindfulness here and there, in a little yoga, stuff like that, and which is good, but that's not what deep transformation means. That doesn't change the view of humanity, the view of oneself. So I don't feel discouraged because of it, because I think that's the way it has been. It's nothing new. It's not like humanity became worse. Same humanity, but maybe revealing some part of it that was sort of hidden because of various forces in society. So in my work, I try to contribute by teaching individuals who are interested and become deeply interested in knowing themselves and in exploring reality, and that these individuals become like lights in the world, like places of uh, understanding and sources of love. They have their impact in the world, but I don't think of it as going to change the world. But humanity needs those individuals. All throughout history, it is known that humanity needs spiritual people, realized individuals. Otherwise, humanity will move to worse darkness, will become basically lost, not survive. So the the people who are in touch deeply with their spirituality, in some sense, sustain the whole world in a different way. In the sense, keeping the true spirit of what a human being is alive. And that has quite an impact, but it is not an impact that changes society. It's an impact that sustains the continuity of the human race. That's been known by many traditions. The Sufis talk about it explicitly, you know.
Whoa, Hameed, there's so much in what you just said. Maybe I can just highlight some of the points because I am concerned that there was so much in that. It'd just be good to name a few of the key points. And
Yeah, and let me say a few things also, Roger.
Yeah, John.
Anyway, I've been working with your book now for 4.5 months, and I'm on the third reading of it, and it's lectio divino. When you're working with a sacred text, whether it's scripture or something else, it there's a transmission that happens. And I've thank God, because I was going through some pretty dark places, and it's really been a personal journey for this. And I've been meditating for many years and praying, but I've started to do the inquiry work that you recommend. And I'm a rookie. I'm new at this stuff, but it has proven extremely helpful, and has allowed me to break through some stuff that was stopping me. And in your work, you talk about, you honor the ego self, the self of psychology, and talk about how its dissociation from the sacred realm or from being in the cosmos is largely what impoverishes us in the modern world. And you give us a methodology and a way and an understanding of where we're going, so that we can get beyond the smaller self of psychology into the self of soul, which is presence and consciousness itself. And it is the encounter with that through the love of truth and for the deep looking within that begins to heal us and transform us and help us to see reality in an absolutely fresh and magnificent, deep way. So,
I'm glad you're finding it useful, but that is my intention. If somebody really reads these books I write and really content with them, and they really work with them, there is a lot of transmission. I mean, when I wrote the book, the writing was the transmission.
absolutely, that's very clear.
Yeah, writing was the transmission. And I know I myself, when I read spiritual books, depending on how deep the writer is, I get all kinds of transmission. I learn a lot of things like that. I know what I get the state that they're talking about instead of just the words. And so I'm glad that you're learning, you're doing that, because that was my intention. And not everybody has that capacity, sensitivity to feel to what's being discussed in the writing, but some are like you, and the benefit is greater that way. And I'm glad to hear it is helping, and it can help. That's the idea, yeah.
Your writing is truly extraordinary, and I'm a writer, not accomplished writer as you, but I write, and I know that process. And Roger's a very accomplished writer. But you talk about, and getting back to the transmission that happens and the transformative power of this book that we're reading, that we're working with, is that you get into a way of knowing, and I'm taking this from my notes, that integrates the rational discursive mind, which you totally honor, not as an enemy, but as an important thing, with the mystic and intuitive mind. And your writing seems to be an incredible, just an example of that. You have a great knowledge of science and psychology and the world, yet there's this intuitive part that comes through that I was thinking of it as like, this guy is like a mix of Einstein, Rumi, Maslow, and Meister Eckhart, kind of put it all together in a shaker and pour it out. And that's kind of the taste of the transmission I have. And it's extraordinary. And I just want to thank you, Hameed. It's been a real gift.
I'm glad. And one thing, I wanted to say, like when writing this book, I don't feel like there is a person writing it. It's the teaching, articulating itself. And it uses the mind and knowledge of this individual.
Yeah, and Hameed, if I can quote from your introduction, because it's a beautiful statement. As a human individual, I am the author of this book, but not the source of the teaching presented in it. The real source of the teaching is the true nature of reality, the essence of our soul, and what ultimately we are, the elixir that alone can transform our consciousness and life. By writing and publishing this book and the others before it, I'm fulfilling a facet of my personal function as a discriminating and expressive organ and an appreciative servant of this wonderful and magnificent truth of reality.
Yeah. It has always been the case, and I understood it a long time ago. And the more the reader understands that, the better. They're not really reader when they're reading this book and others. It's not the opinion or just the ideas of the individual human being writer. And it's not what people call channeling. I'm not channeling anything. It's more like my true nature is true nature. We all have the same true nature. That true nature expresses itself. And for some reason, this organism is being owned in such a way to not only express its true nature, express true nature as this particular teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And the experience of when that's coming through, I would imagine, is one of peace. You're just allowing your true nature to express itself in your writing, and that's one of the best things that we can do as human beings, I think.
Well, not exactly true. I'm not always experiencing. My experience when I'm writing is what I'm writing.
Mm.
But I'm writing different things, and whatever I'm writing, I am becoming that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes peace, sometimes pure awareness, sometimes emptiness, sometimes nobody there, sometimes, talking about the individual, the ego, I could feel myself as an ego, all of that,
Yeah.
I wanted to go ahead, Roger. I'm sorry.
So it's effectively, for you, Hameed, it's a direct expression of experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and the process of writing, the way I've done it, it's really interesting because that's one reason I liked writing those books, and that the teaching is appearing as my experience. And so and the teaching is, as you see, has many parts and many details in it. And those details appearing as what I am, as my experience as I'm writing. So when I'm writing, I'm not writing just from memory. There is memory, but it becomes actual experience at that moment.
Mm.
That's why there is a transmission.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what makes it a transmission, because the state is there.
Beautiful.
Writing, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And you say is at the beginning that that in the opening to your experience, in the, I guess wouldn't be quite inquiry, but as in opening to experience, that brings forth a um, a worldview, a way of understanding the nature of reality, of being, even of the divine, that is at the heart of your communication and teaching.
Yeah, true nature is, when I say true nature, you could call it divine or whatever, but it is the truth of reality, truth of human being, the deepest, the most fundamental truth of human being. And, it is more of the nature of consciousness or awareness or, it's not physical. And the physical is an outer expression of it, in fact. And even the physical is at some point, in some realization, appear as not physical, as usually pure consciousness, pure awareness. And then other realization that I don't mention in this book, become mysterious. The distinction between physical and spiritual disappears. And the concepts of physical and spiritual disappear. It is just what is.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just tell you how true nature manifests itself in many ways. There's no one way our true nature manifests, and there is no final way it manifests. It keeps manifesting itself in different ways and different. So that's why this path is a journey of discovery of a true nature manifesting its possibilities.
And it seems that that's one of the distinctive aspects of your work in the diamond approach, Hameed, that so many traditions posit a final state of consciousness or being as the, with a capital T, realization. And one of the hallmarks of the diamond approach, of your teaching, is that No, the true nature is endlessly creative. There are endless possibilities of realization and recognition, and that, as you say as beautifully in your book, Runaway Realization, that each opening can be a portal to further openings. And it's a very distinctive and beautiful aspect of the diamond approach.
Yeah, it is a distinctive thing. And because as you said, most teachings, most tradition, they posit a truth that they want to arrive at. And the teaching took me through that too. It took me to this, to pure consciousness is the ultimate, and pure awareness is the ultimate, and I lived several years in each one of those, and believing it completely, and not understanding those traditions deeply. And part of the time, I was interacting with those traditions, in the sense, interacting with some of the teachers, literature, and so for a few years, I really was convinced that is real. And then things changed, not because I was trying to make them change or anybody. Things changed and it revealed, oh, there's another way. So, oh, that wasn't really the ultimate. This is the ultimate. And then until I had so many ultimate, until at some point I said, I don't think looking at the thing in terms of ultimate is really an appropriate way to look at things. This is just one way, which is useful. And definitely, if you get an ultimate particle teaching, you are free. You're free. You have accomplished the path. And so I'm not dismissing that that's true, but this path is a path of discovery of the possibilities of of what we are, not just being free from suffering.
Yeah,
Well, one of the themes in this book is the ascent, going
Yeah,
up and working to
yeah,
the realization of true nature and essence and the nature of the soul,
yeah.
organism of consciousness, you call it. But then, fortunately, unfortunately, you have to do the descent and bring it back into the world through all these different things and into basic being a human being. And it's very much like the Zen ox herding pictures, where the last picture, man with
Yeah,
an open heart and open hands,
yeah.
goes back into the world. And you talk about just being human in the day-to-day experience and the preciousness and sacredness of friendships and relationships, and just doing what we do, how that's been part of your. And I'm also reading the Jewel Path, which is a biographical account of the beginning of the movement, which is absolutely fascinating. How that human part is also part of the journey, and bringing back the mountaintop of essence into the momentary, moment to moment expression in our human life is also part and parcel of the journey.
Well, if you think about it, is there any spirituality without a human being?
don't know.
I don't know. You tell us.
We can, I mean, well, it might be from other star system, but for our for us on this planet, it's always any realization is of somebody there, some human being, regardless whether the state says there's no individual, but it is happening through individual because the other individual next door isn't experiencing things that way, you know. So, so the journey of ascent and descent, which I, go in detail in this book, is really a matter of uh, how our true nature manifests itself, or we recognize ourselves as deeper and vaster states of being until we recognize ourselves as what I call the absolute dimension, which is, what's called Brahman, and some tradition what's called Dharmakaya, and some Buddhist tradition. It's the infinite vastness. There's a total peace and emptiness, uh, non-existence and existence together. inseparable as one reality. And so it's moving from being human soul to being boundless love, to being boundless infinite presence, to being all the way to the absolute. And then Jenny just said how that absolute begins to come down into the world. Instead of being a transcendent reality, it moves toward becoming an immanent reality.
Beautiful.
And the human being, the individual, become the expression of that carries all the wisdom of all those dimensions, all the whole journey of ascent is present in the descent. And so the descent doesn't mean leaving the realization and going to ordinary experience, mean bringing the vastness into the realm of life. I think that's what the ox herding picture of Zen say. And finally, to be in the marketplace doesn't mean the Zen master who's in the marketplace forgot about the empty circle. The empty circle is still there, but he's still in the marketplace. So all that vastness appears is all integrated in some kind of a distilled way. And a human individual who is not a separate person in the way. Many teachers think if you are a human individual, you must be separate. That's not true. You can be a human individual that is expressing, just like a wave of the ocean. You're expressing the ocean. You're the same thing as the ocean, but you're a particular manifestation of it that expresses it in a particular way that also integrates one's history and culture and appropriate the times, which is really important. You can't just be spiritual, express yourself regardless of what's happening at the time. You have to consider the situation, where we are. And the idea, that's what I call the complete human being, which is the ideal of both Kabbalah and Sufism. Complete human being is the one that integrates both heaven and earth. To create the dimensions of the ordinary dimension with the transcendent dimension as one being who lives in both. So the Sufi says the complete human being has a foot in each world. That's the way they look at it. But the actual experience is that the heavenly or the divine or the true nature world is present, expressing itself as a particular human being who lives, talks, and walks. See?
Yeah, beautiful. And most of our maps of the spiritual life really are more about most of them focus on the ascent and the realization of the absolute or whatever aspect of that is the focus of their tradition. And not so many, it seems, bring a rich description to the process of integration and what the Christians would call the unity of life, or you're calling the complete person.
Yeah.
That seems less common.
You see it more in Western tradition than Eastern tradition. Western tradition, Eastern tradition tend to focus on the transcendent. It's not like the embodiment is absent, but the focus mostly in the transcendent. The Western tradition, the human life being a human being, being an individual is important. Like the Sufis, the Kabbalah, whatever, all of those really, it's Christianity is the human living, the divine life, and it becomes important. So in this path, it really takes both points of view, bring them together.
Yeah, you do that incredibly well. And I just had a question, just a biographical. When did you start speaking English? Because it's obviously a second language.
Yeah.
As a boy?
That's true. Well, when I was growing up in my home country, Kuwait, English was a second language, taught as a second language. So I was in high school when I started learning it. But I didn't really learn how to speak it till I came to this country because, when you take one class a day in English, but you don't speak it at home, it doesn't become really spoken language until so when I came to the US in 1963, I had to actually speak it all the time. And so that's when I learned that it became more of, and I read a lot in English and I went to college and all of that. I had so English became. I mean, at the present, my thinking became English at some point. I remember shifting how my thoughts moved from Arabic to English.
Yeah, I mean the writing has such clarity and such as this is a second language. My God, what a gift of the logos of the spirit to be able to write.
Yeah. The clarity doesn't come from the language, come from the state. You see, the clarity is when I'm writing, there is a particular lens of clear discrimination that is beyond the ordinary mind. That's what I call the divine mind, which is that's why we call it diamond quality, which is faceted, sharp, clear, but as a consciousness, not as a physical thing. And that's an instrument through which the articulation happens, the perception and the articulation, that perception. So the clarity really comes from the true nature itself, not just from my skill in English. I do have the skill in English, but I have other people I know in my studio who have better English than mine.
Well, you wouldn't know that by your writings. I mean, I'm so impressed. Just writing itself, it's just, and there's no wasted verbiage. And I said this last time, but the problem became what not to underline. Because if you underline everything, why underline anything? It's just every bit is a jewel, is a diamond, and can be just.
I mean, that's, you see, I have two kinds of books. There are books that I write myself with my hands, and there are books that are transcript of teaching I've given and transcribed and edited. They're very different. The one I write are more difficult to read because it's very condensed. Condensed, there's no word spared, It's like, because when I'm writing, I'm just writing with the truth. I'm experiencing it. I'm not thinking about, whether it's easy to get. Or for me, it's very obvious, clear, and so I write. And so for the writer, for many people tell me, "Oh, this is very dense." In some sense, very dense because it's compact. There's nothing wasted, as you said. Each sentence is really saying something new.
That's right.
Yeah.
And each reading is just another layer of depth. I mean, I've been working on this, I think, 5 months now, near 5 months, and it feels like I could work on it for the rest of my life and just really start to get it, just start to
well, I mean, to go through that path, all that knowledge, all that experience implicit in that book, it could be a lifetime or many lifetimes. There's a lot there in terms of experientially,
Yeah. Yes, I get these calls from John at all times of the day saying, "Have you read this? Have you read?" So, maybe we could move into the what is the kind of context for a lot of your work and laying out of the diamond approach, Hameed, and that is your understanding of our human nature, and the way the term you prefer to self is soul. And you say soul is, quote, the best description of what a human being is. And the nature of the human being is dynamic, a living organism of consciousness, an ever-changing, open, multidimensional field whose experience can come to know and actualize all dimensions of being, Well, there's a lot, we could spend a lot of time just on that description of souls. why, why don't you unpack some of that for us?
You see, for me, it's such an, although soul was a discovery for me, and I wasn't using the word souls, I was just going with the usual spiritual parlance until at some point there was an actual discovery of recognition of the consciousness that's been going through experience, been learning as a particular consciousness. And when I saw that, after that became, it's obvious everybody actually have an inner experience, have a subjectivity, a field of subjectivity. What is that? When you think about it, what does it feel? Emotions and thoughts and sensation, they're all happening in some kind of, are they happening just in the body? That's how most people think of it. It's happening in the body. But what is it? There's some sensitivity there that is, or a knowingness or an awareness that is implicit in all of the subjectivity. And that subjectivity is really the soul, but it's not discerned yet as a field of consciousness. People think of it that all these things happening in me. What's in me? What's in me? You know. Well, then spiritual teachers come say, well, this is just being an individual, self that is, and that is partly true, but that's not the whole thing. The individual self doesn't, where does it get its consciousness? Where does it get its awareness? Where does it get its malleability? How? Because experience is always changing. Even before we get into spiritual transformation, ordinary experience that doesn't stay the same. It's very dynamic, moving, going from one thing to another, and even when we're suffering, it's going from one thing to another. So that is really the soul that's going through that. So that's what I mean by soul. It's just when you recognize this field or the place or the continuum that where experience happens, we realize it is an actual, we can discover that it is made out of pure consciousness, but it is a certain kind of consciousness, dynamic, it's alive, it's a transformative, it's a kind of the consciousness that learns by being impacted by experience. So it can learn in a bad way in the sense of become rigid in its learning, or it could learn by opening up to new, different possibilities and becoming more flexible.
And you describe the discovery of the soul as the experience of the soul as being experience of presence. Can you tell us a little more about what you mean when you say presence? What's that? What is that actually? The experience of that.
Yeah, you see. Okay, so I call the soul a living presence because presence can be experienced as through nature itself can be experienced as presence. That is not, it happens within the soul. So presence is just a sense of I amness, beingness. And this I amness can be I am peace, I am love, I am awareness. So that is experience presence. But that, the presence as a pure presence, the question of being alive or not is irrelevant. It's just consciousness, and the soul is that consciousness with an aliveness added to it that makes it more dynamic, more transformative, and more capable of learning. Because a pure presence cannot learn; it stays what it is. You see, nature.
You don't have to fix it; it's already done.
Already complete in itself. The soul is always completing itself by learning.
It seems to me one of the things you're trying to do is to rehabilitate a deeper understanding of what a human being is. Your choice of the term soul and your recognition of its multifaceted, multi-layered, dynamic, holographic nature is really a much, much richer understanding of who we are than, for example, contemporary psychology, which has very little depth by comparison. So, um, so, and more than multi-layered or multifaceted, it's grounded and capable of realizing being. That seems.
Yeah. Yes. So the soul is really, life is sort of expression of consciousness, but in an animal or primitive, that consciousness is still not able to be conscious of itself. As a human being, consciousness developed so it can be conscious of itself. And the next stage, not only conscious of itself, but knowing that I'm conscious, but knowing what the consciousness is. That is the realization. That's the opening to the spiritual experience. Not that I'm conscious, but what is it that's conscious? And that is learning the ground of consciousness or the pure consciousness. And that is the really true opening to spirituality. And so, I mean, the book goes through many chapters about how we are born that way. We are born as a soul, a pure soul, actually, and innocent, open, and full of joy, could be with different qualities or different people. But that becomes formed or conditioned or impacted in such a way that that consciousness loses awareness of its nature. And that what we call the development of the ego, which is, by the way, is a necessary thing. It's not an error. It is needed for physical survival. We cannot physically survive if we don't recognize ourselves as a physical being who can be damaged, who can learn and develop or get sick. We need to be there to take care of ourselves, you see, to survive. And we need to survive to get to the place of being able to realize reality. So it is a necessary stage. Ego stage is a necessary stage for enlightenment. It's not a mistake. It's a necessary stage. But what happens for most humanity, they get fixated on that stage and they take it to be that's it. That's the final stage. When it is really just a necessary stage, we can go beyond.
That's very important, and I love that how you honor the ego, that self as a necessary, essential vehicle for the evolution or for the waking up of the deeper self.
And I'm saying that because many teaching they say it's an error.
Yeah.
It's a mistake. And I'm saying it's not an error. The true nature is manifesting consciousness in such a way so that it can become an ego. Who has the error? There's only consciousness. Who's in error? God is in error. Obviously it is part of the design, part of the possibility, the true nature that manifests consciousness in such a way that it can survive physically. And surviving physically, we can then learn to go deeper and recognizing what is surviving, not just the physical, but the subjectivity of the physical that animates the physical. And then we recognize it at some point as a living presence of pure consciousness, and where when we feel something, it is consciousness feeling modulations in itself.
Yeah.
And part of the difficulty is, Hameed, as you point out, in a couple of places, when you are putting forward the importance of acknowledging ourselves as soul rather than self, you point out the self is rather a vague concept with many different interpretations. And unfortunately, the same is true of ego. They're some of the most overused words in the language. And there's a massive difference between the different understandings of ego as the central organizing principle, a la psychodynamics, and as a separate self sense. And many of the spiritual discussions and practices tend to confuse these. And as you say, make ego an error as opposed to an essential developmental process.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and I go through how the development happens actually, where the pure consciousness sort of becomes an ego or develops an ego, and then we identify with the ego. That becomes, if we identify with it, we think that's all we are. That's the error. You see, if we think we got it, well, I'm grown up, I am this person, that's it, that's who I am. If you just stay with that, that is the wrong belief because the mind is not open to see the possibilities, further possibilities.
Yeah, and that seems like one of the one of the major limitations of our contemporary cultures, and one of the reasons why we need, as you pointed out, people with deep realization as part of our world to point out that there are further possibilities, and that what we take for normality is actually a form of unrecognized collective developmental arrest. And the failure to recognize that is tragic, and one can see it as underlying, as you've suggested, so many of the dysfunctions and suffering in the world today.
Yeah, we take that, what I call arrested development, to be the final development, and it is like a bottled up consciousness is sort of the contraction. It makes it has a lot of pressure because it wants to open up and expand. So the pressure appears in all kind of intensities. Intensity can be negative, can be hatred, can be aggression, can be or sense of suffering and pain and difficulty, different kinds, because it's like the conscious trying to open up, trying to move on to the next stage. So there is a lot of pressure, and at some point, however, for the fortunate individual, the pressure is felt as a deep desire for something deep or different. But one thing I want to say about the soul, I did not invent the concept of the soul. The soul, the idea of soul, the way I'm talking about it, is being present in especially Western culture. The Greeks had it, the Christianity has it, Judaism has it, Islam has it. So they all talk about soul. And if you remember the old books, when they say how many people in this room, they say how many souls. They don't say how many people. Because it's recognized that everybody is a soul, and so the soul in the ancient time, it was obvious everybody was a soul. We lost it by the last 2 centuries by moving into everybody is just self, and that became focusing on the part of the soul that has become what is called separate, experience itself as a separate self, which is the ego.
And in your teaching, it's that individual ego, then self, that is the essential vehicle for the realization of our essential unity. That we couldn't get to the unity without the individual expression of each human being. Is that more or less what you're saying there?
Well, what I'm saying is that without the individual, there is no experience of unity. I mean, in other words, first of all, to get into subtleties of spiritual nature, which is for unity to make sense, there has to be disunity. We have to experience this unity. We have to experience the separateness of each individual and separation of each object, which is how ordinary life is. And then when we get into what I call non-dual or boundless realization, we experience the unity of being. But the unity of being, it appears as unity in contrast to disunity. If there was no disunity, there's no reason for the unity. That's why in my further books, I go beyond the unity and disunity to a realization the question of unity, disunity is irrelevant.
Mm.
You know, reality, unity, disunity was on the way to learning about true nature.
Yeah. And in your discussion of, well, let me just back up and say your point about the prevalence of the idea of soul in many Western traditions, which was lost over the last couple of centuries with the rise of science and a turn to a more reductionistic, materialist way of viewing not only the world, atoms clashing, etc., but our own human nature. And sometimes talked about the disenchantment of the world, that we lost the depths of our appreciation and recognition of the deeper nature of reality and of ourselves. And from that perspective, you're trying to rehabilitate a deeper understanding, bring back a depth to our own self-appreciation.
Yeah.
And at the same time, bringing in the contemporary understandings from psychology.
Yeah. Psychology helps us see how the soul became an ego. You see, which usually in the traditional teaching, there isn't that understanding. They just say, well, the ego, we need to be free of the ego. But how did the ego come about? You know, and our depth psychology has developed in such a way that we see all the stages of how that's happening. Although the psychologists themselves don't know that what has developed is the development of the soul.
Yeah.
They think of it as development of the mind. They think of it as mind, but as if it's just all mental structure. But while we know that really the individual ego is not just mind, it's not just thought, it's all of experience.
Yeah. And there's a very important implication of this this bringing in of a psychological understanding, Hameed, into the diamond approach, in as much as you point out that these cultures, these traditions, with an understanding of our depths of soul, etc., our spiritual nature, because they didn't understand early development and the way that can go awry, they do not understand nor have effective treatments for the psychological dysfunctions that spring out of those early developmental problems.
That's very true. So there is a direct way of dealing with hasn't been. I mean, there, as you know, there are all kinds of things that happen throughout history. Magic and all kinds of things, healing and different things they try to do, different degrees of effectiveness. But now, since we know how things happen, we can, because of what we call now psychodynamics, which is how our original early experience impacts our present experience and forms it in the way it is with all this difficulty. By seeing that, we can unravel that whole development, in an orderly and fashion through inquiry. That's what inquiry is an important thing, because if you just do meditation like mindfulness, or you're just aware of what's there, that does not include inquiry. And it's true to get you to states of awareness and all of that, but it doesn't really necessarily unravel the ego. It doesn't.
and doesn't reveal psychological defenses, which
Yeah.
do not show up in awareness because they are unconscious, but they become very clear in relationship and the
Yeah.
therapeutic relationship, or in the diamond work with a teacher, for example. So you're able to bring
And
them in.
one side thing about that, and that it is possible, that's what I learned, discover, it is possible for somebody to be highly realized, meaning being their true nature and knowing what that is. However, some parts of their ego is still unworked out. There's still pattern behavior and belief and thing that comes in life that that is does not express the true nature itself, express the history. And in some sense, those individuals, I mean, depending on how the individual was, how it shows what kind of distortion manifests itself, even in a realized individual. And beside the distortion, people are aware of distortion. They hear stories about it. But what's not obvious is that this human being is not living their life fully.
Mhm.
You see, they can be realized and experience themselves that way at least sometime. But when it comes to action, to living, to interaction, they're not that realization. They're not that pure awareness living it. So their life is not complete. They're not living the complete human life.
And the final test is behavior. Is really.
Yes.
Hameed, I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a friend of mine, very dear friend, who's been in your school or the Diamond Approach for 30 years.
Yes.
And he said something that seems to follow what you were just saying now. And this really shifted me. He
Yeah.
said that the content is the path. It becomes a path. So instead of just trying to ignore the content, I started inquiring into the content and into past wounds and into this stuff. And that led me to a whole new way of realizing and a new way of practicing. It's really extraordinary. Content is not the enemy. It's the actual, the path itself.
Yeah. So inquiry becomes a new methodology that is really added to many other spiritual practice already good. It's just a new one that uses that knowledge we've had, psychological knowledge, and also uses the fact of knowing the soul, how the soul is impressionable, how it can learn, and how it can unlearn, by letting go of what it had learned. Learn, I mean, what impacted it. It could be a good thing. You learn about, biology, whatever. You don't lose that in realization. However, you lose how it impacts your behavior, your attitude. That one don't have to stay that way. We can be free of those.
Yeah. And I mean, in your emphasis of the importance of acknowledging ourselves as souls with beings with real depth and dimensionality, you also emphasize that the soul is hard to grasp or comprehend. I quote you as saying the experience of the soul is vague, ambiguous, and imprecise and impressionistic. Have the sense of, yeah, it is hard to kind of
Yeah.
wrap one's head
That's
around.
why, it's hard to know because we are a soul. A human being is a soul at the same time. It's hard for them to recognize it. And I'm saying it that way in distinction to experiencing a pure presence. When you experience presence, it's very distinct. I am what I am. Like I am pure presence, or I am pure peace, for instance, or pure love. That is very clear, distinct. While the soul is it's a constant transformation is impacted by the past, impacted by the present, and so it's not just one thing. It's a living organism, but it is a living organism of consciousness, which is sort of for many people is a new concept. What does that mean? living organism of consciousness. You see, we know about biological organisms, but consciousness itself to be an organism, and I call it an organism because it grows and develops and learns and can be wounded, hurt, or can be healed, and all of that. In that sense, it is an organism, and we can learn to be that. Even though we are aware of our body and physicality, the inside of it is the consciousness, is the soul. Because really, the soul, the Greek knew it, the soul is inseparable from the body. And the soul is like the inner side of the body and what animates the body. And so we're always in touch with the soul. We might not recognize what it is. I mean, you can't have experience right now without the soul being the soul. If you're just a physical body, you'd be dead.
You suggest some reasons why it's so difficult to grasp or get our heads around. You suggest because, for example, all parts of the soul are interconnected. It's holographic and dynamic. There's a lot in that. What's it mean that the soul is holographic?
Well, it is usually, and when we look at things physically, our senses are divided according to the sense organ, the seeing, the hearing, the tasting, the sensing, and smelling, all of that. In the soul, they are not differentiated. They're all together throughout all the medium of consciousness. And also holographic, that's one way that all the capacities of perception are present throughout the whole medium. So, like I can taste with my belly, for instance. I can have sweetness in my head, because it's all the soul that has those things. But also holographic, and it's a deeper realization of the soul, which is that a holograph means each part of it can contain all the other parts. It's not like a regular video where pictures after like frames of appearance appearing one after the other. They're all embedded within each other. It's all it's a mysterious kind of I mean the soul is a medium, but you can't give it a size, and you can't give it a form, and what you could experience like pure clarity in the head, and the pure clarity can appear in the heart because it is in everywhere, you see, and each part contains the qualities of every other part. So it is a magical medium that way.
So in each individual soul, we contain the whole at the same time. So it's that individual soul that can lead us to the essential unity of all things as in a hologram. Right. Each little part contains the everything.
Yeah, the hologram, when I talk about hologram, I'm talking about a certain kind of realization. There's some kind of ways true nature manifests itself, which can appear as experience of the soul, where there is what's called an non-dual, which is a unity of everything, because everything is made out of the same fabric, right? Like the walls and the people, the trees, all are expression of consciousness or awareness, for instance. And there's a medium of consciousness and awareness that is everywhere. That's the essence of a non-dual realization. But the other kind of realization, which I call when the holographic happens, which is as a particular soul, as an individual here, I have the universe within me.
Yeah.
That's when Blake said, the universe and flower, or the grain of sand is contain the whole universe. That's the holographic. And it is a particular realization where each particular is united with other particular, not because they are waves on the ocean, because they're all really in the same place. There is no physical distances in the way you usually think of them. The physical distances are a conception of the mind. One way of experiencing reality that has to do how the mind holds reality. But the mind let go of the concept of distance. There's no distance. You can't say that one thing is far, one thing close. In some sense, they're all the realization is that each point contains all other points of space and time.
Okay, that's that's always been a mind stretch for me.
Yeah.
And as I recall, this is central to your third turning, is it not? The
Yeah. So we
non-locality.
call
Yeah.
third turning, yes.
Yeah. But that one, Hameed, I'm sorry, that that one always stops me. I accept the validity of it. I hear it from you. I hear it from a few, not a lot of other places, but it's just outside my experience. So
Not many people experience it, and it's not very popular in spiritual discussion these days. Because a spiritual discussion, for a few decades now, be dominated by the non-dual, which is more the expansive, the unity through the medium, infinite medium that manifests as everything, because of the dominance of the Advaita Vedanta, Dzogchen, which are all non-dual. But the view I'm talking about, where holographic view, where each part contains all other parts, exists in Zen Buddhism.
yes,
And
yes,
Zen Buddhism has taken it from a certain kind of Buddhism called the Huayan
yeah,
Buddhism in China, developed, that was their teaching.
hmm
They
Yes.
call it interpenetration. Everything interpenetrates everything else. And so that is actually how that teaching emphasize. In fact, they're trying to understand the emptiness that the Buddhism talks about. So the Tibetan took emptiness to be the emptiness of awareness. And for the Huayan, those more philosopher mystics in China, emptiness for them revealed to them what they called it, the unobstructedness of
hmm
nothing obstructs another. It's so much not obstructed that even distance doesn't obstruct it, space doesn't obstruct it. It is so they interpenetrate. So each object interpenetrates the other object. And that becomes what they actually say is they use the expression, each point of space-time contains all other points space-time.
And the Orthodox Jews, I learned this one time. They told me that to kill an individual is to kill a universe, because each individual contains the universe. And in light of what you're saying, that makes total sense. And
yeah, which is a good expression. It shows the preciousness of the individual.
absolutely.
Because that's the thing, when you get to that realization that has to do with the holographic thing, the particular becomes very important. And the non-dual, the particular, not that important. The particular is just what's relevant there is what's called sameness or equality. Everything is equal. So the uniqueness of a particular is not emphasized. And this realization, which Zen does it very well, in terms of the suchness of things. Each thing is itself. That the particular, it becomes important, revealing its uniqueness and its the fact that it contains everything, but is unique and appears in the world in a unique, different way. So the human uniqueness is present, and the uniqueness of all objects too.
Yeah. And I find that one of the beauties of your work in the diamond approach, Hameed, that there is the recognition of these multiple realizations and the honoring of them all, and seeing them as a kind of almost complementary and holographic, etc. But each revealing more about the enormous mystery of true nature, reality.
Yeah, well, because each one of them really, realizing any one of those is freedom, is liberation, is, I mean, it's enough to know one of those, be one of those.
Mm.
You
Well, when you say there's freedom in any of them, do you think it's how would you, is there a difference in the kind of freedom that each offers?
Yeah, because there are many kinds of ways of knowing freedom. I mean, I have a whole teaching about just freedom, that first we realize the emphasis for some time is presence and consciousness, and the subtler realization, the realization of freedom as such, which is true nature is free, right? Inherently free because it's not impressioned, not conditioned and unconditionable. All that in that sense, it's free, but we can be free in the sense that we recognize that freedom is its own thing, and so I talk about freedom from, freedom to, and freedom as such. Freedom from limitation and conditioning and all of that. Freedom to do, freedom to be, freedom to express, freedom to live. And the freedom as such is just recognize I am freedom. Instead of I am consciousness, I am freedom. And that sense of freedom has an actual affect of freedom. We know freedom purely as it is a state of our true nature.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful, and it has a lot of joy, and the freedom is like multi-dimensional, infinite dimensional, and it's a sense of release and openness and delight, in that freedom, without it being anything, without being an object, without being even a ground, without being presence, without being anything. It's just freedom.
Oh, yum, yum, yum.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm aware that,
That's
wow,
not
we're
in
in
the
such a,
book we're studying, but it is one of the things in the teaching.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, this is key. And this is where the book leads and your work leads. So thank you very much indeed. I'm aware we're approaching towards our completion time, and we've covered so much. I wonder if there's anything you'd like to say or add or leave us with. Freedom is a fine thing to leave us with.
Yeah, definitely. And also that the soul is an organ of freedom. Is really the soul at some point is capable of recognizing freedom and recognize that each human being needs freedom.
Yeah.
That's why human beings want to be free in all kind of way, physical way, emotional way, mental way. Want to be free because our nature ultimately is freedom itself. So if we're not free, we're restricted. We can't be ourselves. So, and we recognize that all human beings are fundamentally freedom, and fundamentally need to be free to recognize that freedom. So if I am freedom, I see everybody else as also can experience himself as freedom. So to restrict somebody else's freedom becomes sort of unimaginable, unconscionable, you know.
Mm,
Seem-
yeah.
a sacred right of each individual.
Beautiful. Well, Hameed, as usual, this has been a wonderful conversation, and it just feels like an enormous gift for all of us, certainly for John and me, and for all the people listening and imbibing this, and certainly it also feels like a transmission. So thank you so much for
Well, I'm enjoying these discussions, and I'm also, feeling that hopefully they'll be useful for,
Yes.
any that the discussion will land in fertile soil, and that can sprout, through spirituality, through humanity,
Yeah, and for
Yeah.
the people that are watching it, I would say to immerse yourself in this book. Again, The Inner Journey Home, and immerse yourself in this teaching. And it ain't easy. It's dense. It's challenging, but it's absolutely liberating. It changes one, and there's not just concepts, but there's a transmission that comes through it. And Hameed, I just want to thank you. And in the 23rd Psalm, it says, "My cup runneth over, overfloweth." So I just feel you've really filled my cup right now to overflowing, and I'm deeply, deeply grateful. Thank you.
Wonderful. We're all overflowing cups.
Yes. That's a beautiful image to leave us with. Hameed, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
so talk to you next time.
Next
Yeah,
time, yes.
next
Have a
time,
wonderful
September.
month. Yeah.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Here I am, John Dupuy again, and I'm here to talk about supporting the Deep Transformation Podcast. The podcast has been an amazing experience for Roger and myself and for our team, and it's been growing. We're currently in the top 2% of worldwide podcasts, which is really remarkable. We think it's very important. We think deep transformation is the only way to go, because if we don't, we're in serious trouble. We're so grateful for the amazing presences and spirit and soul and people who've been on our podcasts. We'd also like to ask you again for your support, financial support, and thank you for all of you who have been supporting this. And up till now, it's all been out of pocket for Roger and myself, and it takes money to produce, pay our staff, and for marketing. The circle keeps on growing, but the quicker that could happen, the more positive effect we could have in the world. And that's what we're here to do. And I was thinking before this, upstairs in my meditation room, I have the famous 10 Zen ox herding pictures up there. And the final one, after guys go through all this journey, is going back into the marketplace with open hands and open heart. So that's what we're trying: open hands, open heart, open mind, so that we can do what? We can transform effectively and deeply, and listen to some of the greatest minds on our planet as to how to do that. So thank you for your support. We love you, and you matter. God bless.